yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Mm, yeah. Born and dead, saved by love, count my blessing from above.
And good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending upon where you are around the world. I am Marcus Holmes, the love activist, and I'm excited to be here tonight to talk about an important topic. So if you are watching us live here on Facebook in the Love and Stuff community or on the Marcus R. Holmes page, or if you're watching us on YouTube events or Twitch TV, I hope that you will click share right now, tag 5 of your closest connections or friends or subscribers, 5 of the more popular ones, to join in tonight's discussion. I'm excited to have our guests with us, and I know that some of you may not know the history of Love and Stuff. Started when we were entering into an interesting season in our republic, in our country, where we had a new president coming in. And there was this talk about the faithless electors and the potential to override what it appeared to have happened, which we thought was a pretty bad nightmare at the time. And we thought that we would explore the faithless electors. Well, 7 women and 17 men started to interact and say, oh, not only about the love of justice, but what about the love of people? And that's how Love and Stuff was born. So tonight we kind of travel back to some of those roots, which we've never tried to get away from completely. And we hope in coming months that you will see the importance of the love of justice and your role in that justice and your role in the demand for justice and equity in our country and in our world. If there is any area where there is injustice, we are all at risk of experiencing that injustice. And so I know that you have heard and read about the leak that has happened with the Supreme Court opinion or draft opinion relative to Roe versus Wade. Well, I thought I would bring one of the brilliant minds within our Love and Stuff community and in the world to come and to lead this discussion. And I will say, on behalf of the Love and Stuff community, while I don't believe that I have or should have the authority to legislate what a woman does with her body, I want every child to have life, right? And it's hard for me to fathom how some women would have to come to that decision if there was some abnormality or the viability of that child was at stake, or if this was the result of some sexual assault or rape. I would never want to envision a woman in that situation, but we know it is a reality. Women face that in our world. So it is not my desire that anyone would have to use abortion as an option or choice, but I don't think that that's something that I would have the right to legislate. So I needed to say that in the beginning so that you understand that's my position. And I know there are a breadth of positions within Love and Stuff, and you're entitled to them, and we honor you having your own positions. But I just had to put that out there. I think that any right, and our guest will walk us through that. Any right that's under fire means that all of our rights could be under fire at any point. And so, having said that, I'm going to bring one of our members of the Love and Stuff community, who is a brilliant legal mind, who is helping us to draft our manifesto that we've been talking about. And you will see more of her on this platform when we do more of our Love of Justice shows. So I want to bring her on, and I hope that you will click share and tag some folks to join us. Valerie Colbert-Osamuede, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Marcus.
I am excited to have you. As you know, you're one of my favorite legal minds to pick. So I love it. It's almost like you're our legal correspondent here, Val. You're our legal correspondent. And so I do, as I've said to you, I do want to add into our monthly offerings some focus on justice. And in my mind, if people aren't focused on justice, that's an injustice in and of itself, I believe. So I don't know that we could really be a true community of love if there is no focus at all about the inequities and injustices that are happening in the world. And then we get that this opinion or draft opinion is leaked. And I'm thought, now how does a leak like this happen in the highest court in the land? I want to turn it over to you because I read it, but I need your sage opinion and advice to guide me through all of these things that I think I don't want to speak cast aspersions, but it felt a little that they were on a crash course to overturn it is how I felt. And so I want to thank you for coming in. What did you first think when you heard that it was leaked?
Well, it's funny because my daughter actually called me on the phone. And I usually get alerts or something, so I must not have been really tuned into my phone on this particular day. So my daughter called and sent me a text. Actually, I was in a meeting. That's what it was. It's later, and she said the Supreme Court had overturned Roe v. Wade. So I was like, well, wait a minute. Usually this stuff doesn't come out till June, the end of the term. And I said, okay. So I immediately get on social media and I call her and she explains, well, really it was a leak of the draft opinion regarding a case called Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. Okay. And so I immediately started kind of looking and, my curiosity to know what was happening and pulled the decision down, started reading the decision. And then I just started reading a lot of things, listening to a lot of things. And I was, first of all, shocked that it was a leak. Okay. And which is generally unheard of in the Supreme Court. You have leaks everywhere else, generally for in the Senate or Congress is for a political gain of some sort. But within the confines of the Supreme Court, having that kind of control is so important and central because so many things people can change their opinion while the final opinion is being drafted. You might read this opinion, for example, for the first time, and say, okay, this is a little bit too much. But then you'll read a dissent that may come along with this, which might say, okay, maybe I want to go with the dissent, or maybe I can express to the person, the justice writing this opinion, I could probably concur with you if you did X, Y, and Z. So, there is a number of books and, articles, and even the prior Supreme Court justices, because they tend not to give a lot of interviews because of their standing, that talks about the back and forth and the intellectual back and forth of the court that goes on before a final opinion is actually drafted and then disseminated to the community, to the world or the country. It's interesting, though, that I did find that really the actual Roe v. Wade decision, not the opinion, but the decision was leaked in and of itself before the opinion was released. Just the outcome, but not the decision.
Wow.
And it's my understanding that the Chief Justice at that time, who didn't know where the leak came from, sat down with the clerks, assuming it was a clerk, that indicated to tell them the danger of leaking. That, okay, this is showing the decision in Roe v. Wade, but what if this had been a decision that dealt with money or dealt with something that would possibly give somebody a leg up, to have gain from the decision before it is disseminated. So there's a lot of reasons why, the leak is very surprising. And of course, there's all kinds of theories as to who did in fact or could in fact have leaked the decision. And, some people say because the decision is so, they call it maximalist, okay, that some folks say it's the liberal side of the court that may have leaked it, to kind of give us a warning, give the country a warning of what's going to happen. And they can align and try to do some certain things and protest. But then there's the other side that says, well, maybe it was the conservatives, which I kind of lean towards, the conservatives that leaked it because they want to lock in. They don't want anybody changing their point of view. They want to lock in the justices who are the 5 that are probably committed to this decision. So to answer your question, I was very surprised that it had leaked. But, given the state of our country, and the court and the makeup and all of the things that go along with it, it was surprising, but not necessarily shocking, so to speak. Okay.
So one of the questions that I want to ask, and we're talking to Valerie Colbert-Osamuede, who is going to be coming more frequently on this platform to talk to us about these social justice issues, because I believe it's important that we get a grasp and understanding of the issues that are impacting us. So I wanted to ask, because this case that you're referencing, that 2 things I wanted to ask, and then I'm gonna this case you're referencing is the one that happened in Mississippi. Is that correct?
Yes.
This is in
Yes.
Mississippi. So
Yes.
I want everybody to hear that, because
Yes.
I no aspersions to Mississippi. I'm sorry, Mississippi, but my folks are from Mississippi, my dad and my mom. And my dad would never take us on vacation or elsewise back to Mississippi. He swore it was a place he was never going back to. And in my mind, that painted for me this narrative that it was not a nice place. It was not a good place, that Black people weren't welcome. Even though I think I read somewhere in the opinion or draft opinion that 53%, 55% of the voters were women. And so, apparently women are voting there. I don't care. I don't trust it that this is the case, that is from Mississippi is the number one thing. But I thought it was interesting what you were just telling us about the intellectual back and forth. So do you have any thoughts about, do you think this was after some intellectual back and forth that this draft came out? What do you think now? Does it put pressure on people who would have responded to in some dissent to say, now that it's out there, I won't? What are your thoughts about that?
I think whoever's going to vote for it is probably still locked in. Now, there may be some softening of the language, because the language is very, very, as we call maximalist. It's like, and it's very kind of condescending as well.
I thought that too. So I almost feel smart hearing that, because I thought they were basically saying the justices before them were dumb.
Yeah. And so there, there may be some softening of the language. And if it's not, you can bet on some pretty blistering dissents, because they're going to counter that. Okay. The dissents are going to counter that. So you can count on some blistering dissents. But yes, this case is from Mississippi. I want to tell you a little bit about it. It was argued, had oral arguments December 1st, 2021. Okay. And the court took up this decision, which is surprising in of itself, because really Dobbs was a case that was asking to determine whether or not Mississippi's 15-week abortion ban, whether or not that was constitutional. I don't want to get deep or anything, not that I think I'm a constitutionalist, but specialist, but a long time ago, it had been determined from Roe v. Wade and a case called Casey versus Planned Parenthood that talked about viability. That viability generally is, anywhere after 21 to 24 weeks, more towards the 24-week mark, that a woman probably would not get an abortion because the fetus is considered viable. Okay. And so there's all kind of restrictions as it relates to abortions and viability. And that's really what the standard has been, where a state could, in fact, put restrictions on abortion. And so we have Mississippi that had a law in place that indicated that it was 15 weeks. It was going to ban abortions after 15 weeks. Now, that was the initial question that went to the court. Once Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, they changed the question. And they wanted the court to determine now whether or not they should overturn Roe v. Wade. So the makeup of the court made once Amy Coney Barrett was put on the court, it made the folks in Mississippi change their question before the court. First, they were just trying to chip away at the viability standard, which most people thought was happening with states. Texas actually did 6 weeks, and they didn't take that up. So really, the surprise was that the court took that up because viability has been established and the law. There's been no change in that as it relates to the law. So, the fact that they were bringing that up was a signal that the court was looking out at a way to overturn Roe v. Wade, and then, or at least chip down the viability standard to maybe that 6-week viability standard that Texas now has, chip it away. And now, but then the question was changed as to whether or not, is Roe v. Wade even constitutional? Now, Justice Breyer called them out on that in oral argument, saying, hey, we don't go with the whims of the public. And, we stand by precedent and stare decisis and, everything really that you should be doing. But this was the case that let the conservative side of the court, particularly Alito and others, who it's not only just the Roe v. Wade and the abortion argument. It is really the whole notion of unenumerated substantive due process rights that aren't in the Constitution, so to speak, that Clarence Thomas doesn't even believe in that, which is interesting in and of itself, because that's an equal protection code. But I'll leave that for another discussion. So anyway, it was surprising that they took up this court because that case, because it had been settled. The viability standard had been settled. So they take up the case, and then lo and behold, the question is changed because now the makeup of the case has changed with RBG dying.
Wow. I thought it was interesting too in reading it, because you're talking about viability. So can you explain more to us? Because I think it felt like they were nitpicking, saying, well, viability could change because of this, and there are many variable factors. So give it back to the states and let their people decide. I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. There are some things that you would want scientific or medical professionals to decide that you wouldn't give to the people or the state. So I thought it was really interesting. So talk to us a little bit more about this viability principle.
So of course, in Casey and really and truly with better science, viability has actually lessened. I mean, the weeks of viability, it is coming down, where a fetus may be able to survive outside of the mother's womb. But that's really it. The standard is, when can a fetus, basically live outside of the mother's womb and survive? And that in that instance, the court has said there should be no abortion or no way to end that life. At that point in time, that is a human life, and therefore, that you have to protect the life of that fetus, because that fetus can live outside of its mother without the nourishment or the wound. It can live outside of that of its mother. So now we need to protect that life, because now it is a life in and of itself.
Yeah, and Autumn is saying viability should be determined and supported by scientific facts. That's part of what I thought too in reading it. And I thought they were just saying, well, that could always change. Well, it could, as you just said, as science gets better, as we get more progressive, it should change, right?
Yeah. And it has changed. I mean, if you think about how long a fetus could survive, what, let's say 50 years ago, okay? Outside of the womb, it probably would not have been, 24 weeks. It may have been closer to the 40-week gestation period, So, the science continues to, bring viability to fetuses. It continues to be able to sustain the life of a fetus for a shorter and shorter period of time outside of the mother's womb. So, it may come a time when viability would be 6 weeks,
Yeah. Yeah.
but right now, it's been something that has been established in law.
Yeah. We're talking to Val Colbert-Osamuede. I say a brilliant mind. And she says she's not a constitutionalist specialist, but she's my constitutional specialist. And she awakens in me this love for law. It makes me want to go with my old self to law school. I read the opinion and thought, I can't wait to talk to Val about these things. Gregory Brown has joined us, Phyllis Lloyd, Teresa Marshall, Chantel, Michelle Jackson. Thank you, Chantel. Click share so those in your group can get this information. Anthony Rembert, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, Autumn, Nicole, thank you for joining us. That jumped out at me, this viability. And then, you're always talking about the Constitution, in our private conversations, and the Federalist and things like that. And so I was fascinated that they were saying, well, the Constitution on its face does not say abortion. It's not deeply rooted in our history.
Right,
There's nothing in the Constitution that says it. And you all are stretching the word liberty. I said, now, wait a minute. The free world that have framers of a free world are stretching the word liberty. We're in trouble.
So what we have here is the way this is written, so everybody is clear that if this is the law of the land, what Alito is doing is it is basically saying, and the short takeaway is that state legislatures, because he wants to send it back to the state, can do what they want to restrict or criminalize abortion. So that's the short, quick holding of what or impact of what this is going to do. So Alito goes on, and you're right, he goes on to say that the Constitution makes no, and let me before I get into that, let me say this. Alito, Gorsuch, these are all justices, Clarence Thomas, they are all what is called originalists. Okay. Originalists. So what they want to do is they try to look at the original intent or the original language or textualists of the Constitution, which is kind of absurd. We can talk about that later. And so based on this kind of framework in his mind, Justice Alito goes on to say that the Constitution makes no reference and no such right is protected by the Constitution as it relates to abortion. Okay. And so the right to abortion really derives from not the constitutional text, but in Roe v. Wade and in other places, it is a part of a substantive due process argument. And it's saying that there are certain rights that we have that were not enumerated in the Constitution, but we do have that. And one of that is the right to privacy. Now, it's interesting that that they would talk about those rights because, the right to the same-sex marriage was analyzed under the unenumerated substantive due process rights. Okay. So what we have here is basically this older gentleman, Caucasian gentleman, saying that if you didn't have rights in this country before, you really don't have rights now. Okay, so if they weren't if any right must be deeply rooted, and this is the quote, deeply rooted in the nation's histories and traditions, and the right to abortion does not fall in this category. Okay, so what does that mean? Let's just take women, for example. Women traditionally had no real rights in this country. Absolutely none.
Or black people.
Or black people, or Native Americans or anybody like that. So this holding is, if you are a person who didn't historically have rights, you're not going to get them today. We're not going to preserve them for you today. Really, that's what that really boils down to.
Wow.
Now, what he tried to do is try to give us a little comfort in that decision and say, but I'm only talking about abortion. And I'm only talking about abortion because, that deals with protecting the right of a fetus or a person, okay? A life, protecting a life. These other rights really don't do that, okay? So, but this goes to the protection of a life. So, all of these other things, same-sex marriage and, interracial marriage, like I said, was also an equal protection argument, and the right to contraception, all of these rights, and I will even say Miranda rights are, are safe. They're safe and secure, okay? But just this particular right, it's not included, okay? It's not included. And he does this whole tortured kind of going back all the way to England. To try to show us that abortion, was never rooted in tradition or anything like that. So,
and he even went, Val, to say that in so many states at the time of the 14th Amendment that it was criminalized, right?
Right.
And, so to say it couldn't have been any deeply rooted rights because it was a criminal act by all of the states, or 26 of them. I forget the exact number.
Right. So he, that's how he kind of justifies the fact that it's not rooted in our tradition. Okay. And so he also later on goes on to try to justify going against stare decisis. And what stare decisis really means, if you don't know, is that it is a legal term that basically says, it's a Latin term that it means to stand by things decided. And so when we have precedent, it's stare decisis. And so you stand by things that are decided. It is what makes this country work, really. Okay. And so for him what he tries to do is he wants to throw in, okay, so this is not the first time that we've, gone against stare or precedent. Let's look at the Board of Education. We overruled Plessy. All of that, Dred Scott and Plessy, and we recognize that, that it's not, you can't be separate and equal, but equal. But the flaw in that is when the courts have gone against stare decisis and civil rights kind of actions such as Brown, it's because they're not taking away a right. They're granting a right. They're expanding rights. So when they have done that in those instances, they haven't taken away anybody's rights. They have expanded rights. This is not the case. They are actually taking away a constitutionally mandated right or constitutionally settled right. So that, that's the difference here when they want to try to say, well, look at Board of Education. No, it expanded rights. It expanded the rights of people. All of those things were expansive. They were not, constricting rights. So that's kind of the difference there.
And I mean, that's so dangerous to me. First, it's dangerous that you leak the opinion, and I'm not going to say, who leaked it. But then it's dangerous to say things settled are no longer settled. And it's because, these things that we consider erroneous and these things that we consider, those things were settled. And then cases behind those, the Casey case didn't revisit some of the stuff, which means to me, it's further settled. They didn't even revisit it to say, this is something we need to correct. And then he goes on to say, well, this is stuff that they didn't correct. So you don't even seek to correct it. You seek to just do away with it.
Throw it out with you know what? It was an interesting case. And I tell you how dangerous this is. There was a case in the 2000s. It was called Dickerson. I can't remember the full, but it's a Dickerson case. And it went to the Supreme Court because they wanted to challenge Miranda rights. okay, which is the right to remain silent, the right to counsel, all of those things that came out of a very liberal Warren court, okay? They wanted to challenge that. You know, there were people in the policing community, law enforcement community that did not want to have that on the books, okay? And so what happened was, and of course, none of that is explicitly stated in the Constitution. None of that, okay? And so you had Chief Justice Rehnquist, who was a ultra conservative of the court. He wrote the opinion, and basically he affirmed Miranda because he says it's stare decisis, it's precedent. You know, it's workable. People have relied upon it. It's settled law, and settled law is best for this country. He even went on to say, you know, if this were a clean slate, if this was first coming to me for the first time, I probably would rule a different way. But I'm not going to, I cannot do that because we have the law that has withstood time. It works for our nation, and people have come to rely upon, you know, the Miranda rights. Women have come to rely upon the right to choose, whether, you know, to choose an abortion, to, you know, carry life, to determine whether or not this fetus is going to affect them medically, which it can do. You know, sometimes pregnancy doesn't, the adverse effects of pregnancy does not really manifest until the end of the pregnancy, that kind of thing. And maybe a doctor will tell you that. So there are so many things, but women have come to rely that, at least to the point of viability, I can have a safe and legal abortion.
Yeah. I thought it was also interesting on your point. I think, at least the way I read it, you help us with it. And we're talking to Valerie Colbert-Osamuede. Thank you, Gloria Davis, for joining. I hope you will click share. We're talking to a brilliant mind within the Love and Stuff community. I'm going to keep saying that. And she is our constitutional authority, is what I'm going to say here in the Love and Stuff community. And you're going to be seeing her more and more as we talk about social justice themes and our love for justice. I think, you know, it's not lost on me that it's been said many times that if there's injustice you know, I don't know exactly how I'm trying to say it, but you know what I'm saying. If there's injustice anywhere, is a threat to justice everywhere, is what I wanted to say. And so you'll be hearing more on a regular basis from Val, because this is really where Love and Stuff started, even though people quickly pivoted and said, oh, the person that you're talking about, or the person that's speaking today is so eloquent, he's fine, what's his number? That's where we went. But where we started was, we talked about the faithless electors, and all in the hopes that people would be awakened to the power that we have in community and our vote, and standing forth in our truth to being in an equitable society requires us to participate and to be aware of these issues. And so I thought it was kind of misogynistic for him to say, because I think a part of his argument, if I'm understanding it correctly, was they would have to consider in overturning the Starry decisis. They'd have to consider whether or not it would have some irreparable
harm.
Thank you. And he said, "What? It's unplanned. You know, pregnancy is unplanned." He basically said, and I thought, now how misogynistic is that? A woman who might have been in a sexual assault. You're right, it's unplanned, but that's not just haphazard, as you kind of recklessly put it in this draft opinion. I thought, how dare you?
Right.
And then say it's not workable. Well, if it's not workable, how many people could stand forth and saying it's working?
Yes.
Of course, there are going to be challenges to it because people want to challenge it. But when we say it's not workable, what test did you really put forth except saying it's barbaric? Well, what test is barbaric? How did you determine it? He cites all these things about, well, you really can't measure this, but then he uses other things that you can't measure either.
Right. So, you know, it's really, the bottom line is, like I said, he's a textualist, okay? And so the bottom line is, unless it is in the Constitution, it's not a right to be protected, okay? And so, yeah, it is misogynistic to say, oh, it's unplanned. Well, you know, there are pregnancies that are planned that can be a threat to the health of a woman. For example, I'll give you another example. When you have in vitro, okay, or I'm trying to think, IVF, and you implant several embryos, okay, and then you have 3 viable embryos that may affect a woman may be carrying, and then it comes to light that one is not as viable and could possibly impact the other 2 viable embryos. Well, at that point in time, there's a decision to abort that third, that let's say it's 3, that third embryo that may not be, an issue for the pregnancy down the line. And then what you end up, that's not unplanned, but that is a planned medical procedure that now it's been determined that, okay, there's one of these embryos that may affect you down the road, or even the viability of the 2 that are at this point in time thriving. So the fact that you're saying all pregnancy is unplanned and that this doesn't affect that, it affects that kind of pregnancy as well. It outlaws technically, a woman and a husband or wife or whomever, whether you're married or unmarried, and you decided to implant embryos, it affects that person's ability to say, I want to abort or end that particular embryo's existence. So it's not just, you out here having sex unprotected and boom, you get pregnant, and there's people who have, contraceptions is not foolproof.
Right.
I mean, we've had plenty of, you have plenty of testimonies that say, I was on the pill, or I had this, or I did this, and I still got pregnant,
Right.
So it's not just, people out here just having sex,
right,
and it's unprotected, and oops, here's a baby. And you actually said, what about rape? What about incest? All of those are not planned pregnancies. Those are not that kind of pregnancy that he's trying to think of, that if you're engaging in sex and, you end up getting pregnant, there are other things that this impacts.
Yeah.
And the one that I, really thought about when I was thinking about it and reading some of this stuff is, wow, I never even really thought about the fact when you have, in vitro, or and then one is not viable, and you have to make the decision to abort that one embryo. That's an abortion.
Yeah. Yvonne Turner has joined us. Annette Green, Bilal Muhammad, Cameron Wimbush. Thank you all for joining us. Stacy Jones, Patrice Buford. We're talking with Val Colbert-Osamuede, who is our brilliant legal mind here in the Love and Stuff community. And I wanted to, because we're 76% women, and even the 24% men, we're concerned about, we might have different positions about it, but we're concerned about your right, which I believe it is your right, even though it is not enumerated, if you will, in the Constitution. I believe it's your right to choose. As I think I'm reading Autumn saying, it's your right to decide. And I'm on the side of that. I know there are other people that might have different thoughts about it, but I want to ask this, Valerie, because it sounds like to me, this opinion would then give Mississippi the right to set the parameters. So let's say, for instance, that the people that you've described who have to make the choices between one embryo and the other, who have been raped or victim of incest, let's say they're disproportionately African American. They could set a set of rules for them, and they could set a set of rules for other folks, right? And thinking of this replacement theory where they want to keep making sure that there are white babies going, they could set certain rules to ensure that versus the other if they wanted to. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, probably. I think that if you could show that maybe the law is flawed in the fact that how it is being implemented, in a discriminatory way, you could probably bring something that would strike down just not the abortion law itself, but how it is put into practice.
Yeah, but then that
So
on that point, then that woman would still have to have that baby by the time it got to court, right? So it still
exactly.
has it's of null effect for her
Right.
or that family,
Right.
because by the time you get remedy, it's not a remedy that really would have cured
Right.
the case.
Right. And it's interesting because a lot of the things that Alito puts in that decision was a part of the oral arguments. So for example, you see that whole thing about there's adoption, you can put the baby up for adoption, but that doesn't secure a problem if I have an ectopic pregnancy
Right,
or there's something that, harms me
right,
as the person carrying the child.
right.
Yeah, there may be some women that will say, you know what, I will have this baby and I will put it up for adoption, and that's not necessarily someone who maybe ordinarily would have an abortion.
Mhm.
But the fact of the matter is there are other things other than just having a normal healthy pregnancy and then saying, oh, I don't want this baby, never did, and I'm going to put it up for adoption as the solution. I still have to carry that child. I
Right.
still have to, I don't know how that impacts my ability, mobility, my job, or anything like that. All pregnancy affects so many parts of our lives that, saying that, the solution is putting the child up for adoption is not really a solution. And
Yeah.
I can, it's interesting because during the Justice Kavanaugh, Brett Kavanaugh confirmations, it was interesting because Kamala Harris asked him point blank, is there any other law that you know that regulates what a male can do to his body? And the answer, he was like, well, I can't think of anything right now. And because no, there isn't one.
Right.
There isn't one.
Right.
Okay, so it's all of those kind of arguments that made its way before the court are in this opinion to try to justify other means of saying that a woman the solution can be this or can be this, but not the solution of a woman deciding for herself, I don't want to carry this baby to term
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
Yeah. I also thought it was reckless because I think he says at some point, well, there are protections in the law, the Pregnancy Act and FMLA,
Right.
like these are cure all end alls. She can just take some leave. And
Right. Yeah.
I thought,
Please.
how reckless is that and misogynistic to me?
It's
Again, is
reckless,
that?
misogynistic, and we're in a society that does not have, nearly as much parental leave as any other industrialized country in this world. I mean, we are sadly
Mhm.
in many things in our healthcare, all of those things. That's fine to say for someone. So really, what we have is a two-tiered kind of thing here. Let's just say that Roe v. Wade is overturned, and we know, and I do have a list of states where I want to share that with you later on. But let's just say it's overturned, but I'm a rich woman, and so I can fly to California and still get an abortion. I
Mhm.
can fly to, or I can drive to Illinois and
Mhm.
from Mississippi to Illinois and get an
Mhm.
abortion. But
Mhm.
if I am poor, and I can't hop on a plane or I
Mhm.
can't travel, for hours and hours and hours, there is the problem. That's
Yeah.
the problem
Yeah.
because it's going to impact those of a different class and socioeconomic makeup differently than it is for other women.
Mhm.
There's some women that probably the ones that voted for the Mississippi law, that it's not going to really impact in that way. Yeah, I can't do it in Mississippi, but I can get on a flight to, to California and get this, get an abortion, and my life has not been changed other than the price of a ticket,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So, there's just so many factors that
Mm.
that it's just so I want to say it's misogynistic, and it's also classist.
Yeah.
His opinion is classist.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, it's this case is troubling, and it should be troubling for everybody.
Mhm.
It's not just troubling for women, because
Mhm.
I made some notes, and I just want you to know some of the things that are not, that have been provided to us, and that could be at risk under this particular textualist, textualist today, because it
Mhm.
suits them,
Yeah.
analysis. So, for
Mhm.
example, the right to vote is not in the Constitution. Hence, we have the Voting Rights Act. Okay.
Mhm.
The right to be presumed innocent is not in the Constitution.
Mhm.
Okay. None of that is in the Constitution. And yet those are rights that we take for granted,
Mhm.
particularly the right to be presumed innocent.
Yeah.
And that is something that has been created through the substantive due process, the unenumerated rights that they say that are in the Constitution, that are unenumerated, and
Mhm.
that lie in the whole essence of liberty,
Mhm.
in the pursuit of liberty, and the fact that you are presumed innocent, unless you're found guilty,
Mhm.
so all of those are rights that we take for granted. There, it's not in the Constitution.
Mhm.
So you should be concerned about, the fact of contraception. It used to be illegal for anybody, married or otherwise, to have contraception.
Mhm.
The right to contraception now could be at risk for two reasons. One, because it has been analyzed under this particular analogy. But so as a single woman, you may, or man, whoever, you may not be able to get contraception. But it's interesting. I lost my train of thought with respect to contraception. Oh, because in this in Justice Alito, in a former opinion, he makes this argument that really contraceptives is somewhat of a way of abortion, an abortive type of medication. So he, no one else has kind of latched on to that, but he has espoused, and I can't remember the technical term of it, but he has espoused the ideal that even allowing someone to have access to contraception is ending the life.
Wow.
So, that's a concern everybody should be, worried about,
Yeah.
because there are a whole lot of rights that are not enumerated in the Constitution. And based on his analysis, is not, it's not in the Constitution. There hasn't been any amendments to put it, to make it illegal. Thank the Lord that, the 13th Amendment came along, because now, slavery is outlawed. But technically, under his analysis, if we didn't have that amendment, then, hey, slavery could still, be something optional,
Mhm.
and so it is something that everyone should be concerned about, because there are a lot of rights that, flow from that, all of that, kind of thing. So it's dangerous. I think that it's the whole notion of originalist thinking, textualist thinking is narrow-minded until they want it to be broad. So let's take, for example, and I know I'm getting a little bit off topic, but let's take, for example, they want to narrow this right to abortion, saying
Mhm.
that it's not in the Constitution, and it's the privacy laws are not broad enough to really encompass abortion. But let's take a look at what that they decided was a broad right, and that's the right to bear arms.
Mhm.
Okay. That's been expanded and expanded in terms, say we should be looking at the constitutional language broadly as it relates to the right to bear arms. But if we looked at it narrowly, when that was written, if we want to talk about the history and when that was written, we're talking about a musket, not an AK-47.
Right.
Okay, so it's broad and it's narrow when it needs to be. When whoever is writing the opinion, or whatever party is, and I hate to politicize the court, but whoever's justices outweigh the other one.
Yeah.
The fact that that gun rights were expanded in Heller, but the founding fathers and the writers of the Constitution didn't know anything about an AK-47 or even a 38 special.
Right.
All they knew was the musket.
Right. Yeah, I thought it was interesting that you just said, you don't want to politicize it, but he kind of points to the Roe and Casey opinions as being politically motivated, that these are things that would have come out of a legislative committee. Sounds like, but really he might be the one that's been influenced more by one partisan or the other. He kind of alludes to that in some of the opinion. I wanted to ask you, I'm doubling back because I wanted to ask you, you talked about a woman of means could fly to another state. Do you think that they will put in some kind of legislation if it goes to the states? It's a criminal act, and what happens if you transport somebody across state? Is that now a criminal act?
So it's interesting that you should say that, because there's been some back and forth on that. We are protected. We have the right to travel. However, that's also one of those enumerated rights, the right to travel. And there is the notion that, not the notion, but it's embedded in our legal and in case law that, you travel to one state, you are protected by the laws of that state. We have free reign to travel this country. It is interesting that you do have not only people, these restrictive abortion laws, just saying, no abortions, period. But what's interesting is they're now, like you said, they are criminalizing it, and they're also trying to make laws that you cannot go to another state to get an abortion. Okay, I don't think that's necessarily going to fly.
Okay.
I think that that's going to really impact and be an analysis under the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, and I don't think that's going to fly. But the fact that you, if you have, laws that say you violated the assisting of this person. Our laws say you can't even assist this person. And, while we can't restrict you from going across state lines, we can, when you come back home, say, you assisted this person in securing an abortion. I can tell you something else too that is also going to be at risk are the pills that women can take to which it's called self-abortion. Okay. And you have pills that you can take. I guess they call it the morning after pill, but there is a more scientific name for it. But the pills that you can take. And so they are also looking at ways, actually, they say that that's really the rising way that women are having abortions. They're looking at ways to restrict that, bringing that in, making that illegal, much like heroin or anything else. And of course, if that happens, there's going to be a black market for that. So there's always a cause and effect to something, and so, you have those issues. All of that springs from this. It's not just going to, the clinic, Planned Parenthood. And I might say that Planned Parenthood in its inception was a Republican, a Republican iteration. It was something that Republicans absolutely supported, because it's not just, as just abortions. It's, it's treatment of, STDs. It's all kinds of treatment that women can get there, other than, an abortion, some women go there for their health care, I'm there to get my normal health care checkup at Planned Parenthood.
Mhm.
So you're going to see a lot of fallout that, that's really going to affect many other things. Not to mention, everybody is saying, can we get a national law that, would allow for abortion? And I don't know if you're aware of this. Of course, last year, the House passed,
Mm.
that law. Okay. And it's languishing in the Senate. And with this coming down, of course, that's gone.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. And let's say that a law is put in place. Let's say we had the votes. Well, what's to stop them from repealing it if there's an equal number of legislator later on from doing it? Now that's a little harder. We know that by looking at what happened with Obamacare. They could never really replace it because the overwhelming majority of the citizens in this country supported Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, and so there's so many things that that offshoots of this leaked opinion, if should it come to light, which I believe it will be,
Mhm.
the law of the land. Like I said, there may be some softening of the language, but I think the holding is going to be the same. That everybody should be concerned about, about this kind of thing. So let me just circle back around to voting.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So, for example, so that's the way to kind of countermand this stuff, is that you go and you vote for legislators that can and do support you know your point of view. If you want to support a woman's right to choose whether or not you would do that or yourself or not, you have to put the people in place that will do that. And effectively, now we have issues, and this is also connected to voting. When you have a controlled House of Republicans, even Democrats, but we'll say Republicans because they do more draconian things. Now there's gerrymandering. Okay,
Mhm.
so all of that stuff affects the vote, that could possibly affect who you put in, who could support a woman's right to choose. So it's all of this is connected, and we need to be out there really exercising that very fundamental not vote, that fundamental right, which is not in the Constitution, mind you, to effectuate change and laws that support what the majority of Americans really want. The majority of Americans support some form of abortion. you know Very few are they want some restrictions on it, but they support some form of abortion. And so, but now you have a court that really is undermining really what the majority of this country wants. So we got to get out there and put our representatives and our people in place, and exercise our vote to make sure to secure the future, that some of these rights are not taken away. We see that the Supreme Court has chipped away at voting rights, the Voting Rights Act. So yeah, it's important who you put in that White House when it comes to electing those Supreme Court justices. Those who will honor Starry decisis, those who will honor, and kudos to, like I said, just Chief Justice Rehnquist, who probably held his nose by writing that opinion, but saying, this is the subtle principle of the land as it relates to Miranda rights. I'm not going to overturn it. So um, it's it's interesting as to where this can go in the future. It can go even further, where
Mhm.
the fetus is considered a person. So there's a lot of personhood laws that are being adopted, that there would absolutely be no reason that a woman would be able to have an abortion under, because it would be considered murder,
Murder,
so to speak.
homicide. Yeah.
Yeah, homicide. And I
Yeah.
did want to make this one other point, because I this is very interesting. So you have all of this, these restrictions, but what are some ways that you could actually what are some ways that you could actually maybe um, challenge the law? And one of the things that folks have been talking about is the religious exemptions,
Mm.
because it's the Christian faith, mainly the Catholic faith, that says life begins at conception. But you have some of the Jewish faith that says life begins at birth.
Mhm.
you know you have the Muslim faith that says life is at the ensoulment, which is, I think someone said, could be like 4 months. And that's when life begins.
Mhm.
Or then there's people that are atheists, who now you're saying, I gotta follow a Christian viewpoint, and you're forcing me to follow this Christian notion of when life begins. And is that like an establishment of religion argument?
Mhm.
Those are kind of, there's going to be some challenges to this.
Mhm.
Okay. And so if Justice Alito was thinking that this was going, as he said, Roe didn't settle this question, this doesn't settle it either.
Mhm.
And matter of fact, I think it makes it worse, because I think, like I said, most people do think there should be some parameters around abortion. So, even if they think, 21 weeks or 24 weeks is too far out, they may be okay with 15 weeks. I was reading something the other day that most abortions, 90% of abortions, occur before the 15th week.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of abortions before even that 15-week ban that Mississippi was talking about. So,
Mhm.
you know, there's so many things, challenges to this that can happen
Mhm.
along the way.
Mhm. You mentioned that you had a list of the states. I don't know if you want to share from that list any.
Um, as I indicated, there are a lot of states that are poised, to if Roe is overturned. And so they're like in three categories. You got, those states that are committed to abortion rights. Then you have those states that have anti-abortion right laws that are ready to be triggered, Michigan being one of them.
Mhm.
um, and then you have the smaller group of states that they favor political restrictions, and that's going to be some kind of political dialogue as to what that is. But I have a list of states that list what could happen even pre and post Roe being overturned. So, for example, Alabama, okay,
Mhm.
Roe, the abortion was available up to 20 weeks. Without Roe, the abortion will be banned, and it will go back to a pre 1973 law. Okay.
Wow.
Alaska, with Roe, there's no gestational age restrictions. And without Roe, it's unclear as to what would happen. In Arizona, a new law is set to outlaw abortion after 15 weeks, which would be effective this summer, but it may be moot or changed. Arkansas, with Roe, abortion is available up to 20 weeks, and then without it, it goes back to a pre 1973 law. I'll get some places a little, of course, Colorado, there's no gestational age restrictions with Roe. Without Roe, abortion is protected by law, in the state. So, throughout the pregnancy. Connecticut, with Roe, abortion is available to Viability. Without Roe, abortion is protected by state law. Get some a little closer to us, if that's what we're interested in. I'll do some of the southern states, Georgia, because that's really where the problem is going to be, women in those southern states. Georgia, with Roe, abortion is available up to 20 weeks. Without Roe, abortion is banned.
Wow.
Okay. And existing law prohibiting abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy is not yet in effect, but it's probably going to go back to being banned. Illinois, which is very interesting. And it was interesting because my daughter was telling me when she was in college and when she was president of the DePaul Dems, they worked very hard to get Illinois to change its law. So with Roe, abortion was available up to viability to strengthen this law. Now abortion is protected by state law, prior to viability. So you can go to Illinois and get an abortion. Indiana, abortion is available up to 20 weeks. Without Roe, abortion will likely be banned. Wow. And that's based on the history of the state. Iowa, with Roe, available up to 20 weeks. Without Roe, it will be banned. Kansas, with Roe, abortion up to 20 weeks. Without Roe, they say it's unclear. Kentucky, with Roe, abortion available up to 20 weeks. Without Roe, abortion will be banned. Post-Roe trigger ban to take effect. And just looking at Michigan, okay? With Roe, abortion is available up to viability. Without Roe, abortion is banned. And that's based on it says a pre-1973 abortion plan and like a 1931 law. That is the law that was never repealed, never pulled off the books. You have Governor Whitmore is trying to challenge that. That's probably not going to happen based on the makeup, it's in front of the Michigan Supreme Court. But I don't think that's, she's trying to protect it. And and she even said, it's a long shot, but I have to do something. And it's interesting because, and I'll stop there. Let me see what Ohio, Ohio. With Roe, abortion is available up to 20 weeks. Without Roe, abortion is banned. So you have those other states like California. Of course, it's not. You have those New England states where abortion is protected. Believe it or not, some people would think they would be very conservative, but it's the Midwest and the South, and so you do have three tiers of abortion laws that affect women, in this country, so it is interesting as it relates to what Dana Nessel has said here. She's indicated that she would not, excuse me, throat is dry. She would not, basically, she says, I don't think that she would say she would not prosecute an abortion kind of laws. But she says, of course, we have 83 local county prosecutors that she doesn't have control over. You have Kim Worthy, who came out, a week or so ago, saying that she wasn't going to prosecute anybody in Wayne County. Okay. So, now, so you have this hodgepodge now of, areas in the state where you can or maybe cannot be prosecuted. So, it's a conundrum, and it is, and that's why Starry decisis is important. So all of this doesn't happen. So, I don't think anybody thought that there would be a complete overruling of Roe. But like I said, once the makeup of that court changed and the question was changed before the court, the opportunity was there, and there were enough people on that court that has that conservative bent that it is probably going to happen.
Yeah. So you believe that it might be softer language, but it's going to happen, and then the states will take it up. And that is why the power of the individual vote, while we still have it, right? Because that's not in the
Right.
Constitution either. But the power of the individual vote to ensure that you are electing people in your state legislature, governors, and others that are going to effectuate the values and beliefs that you espouse.
Right.
And so I
Right.
think, as you're right, it ties clearly into that. There is still that opportunity, of course, in the religious exemption. I was thinking that too, Val, that some people say, hey, this is my belief. You're forcing on me a
Right.
Christian belief versus this belief, or my right to have any belief.
Right.
I don't know if they'll argue that, well, that ain't in the Constitution. I don't know if that's, I think this encroachment on liberty is deliberate to be able to say, this is our time to overturn it. And I think now more than ever, people have to stand up for the love of justice and say, I've got to position myself just like states are to be ready to vote for the people that can make the difference, and demand that the people that you put in office, hold them accountable to discharge the duties that you have sent them to your capital or wherever to do.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that is so important. What else
Right.
would you tell folks? I know you're working on our manifesto. What else would you tell people about getting engaged? I'm concerned about the battle that's happening in Georgia
And Pennsylvania.
and I am, hopeful that our friends and family and the people who have friends and families in those states, that you start to have dialogue with them to make sure that they are awakened to what is happening in their state. That's one
Yeah.
of the things I want this manifesto to be able to do, is that, okay, I'm not living in Pennsylvania, but I got kinfolk there. I'm not living in Georgia, but I got friends and kinfolk there that I want to be engaged around this
And let me
process.
tell you, I'm not living in Pennsylvania, but there's a senator that's going to be sent to Washington that is going to be a part of the process of determining whether or not to vote on certain laws. And should they decide, should they be of a, Trumpian appeal or mindset, you're not going to see progress. Okay.
Right.
So yeah, you may not live in Pennsylvania, but they're sending a senator to Washington, D.C. that affects you.
Mm-hmm.
It affects you. So,
Mm-hmm.
you need to know who's running really in every state,
Mm-hmm.
and if you can contribute to their campaign, certainly, these days politicians love, a lot of small donations go a long way. If it's $5, $10, $20 that you throw to a campaign,
Mm-hmm.
it all adds up,
Mm-hmm.
and not to mention the fact that, maybe you can't give money, but you can certainly get to understand the candidates, in some of these very important states. And then if you do have friends,
Mm-hmm.
engage them and let them know,
Mm-hmm.
hey, do you know there's a Senate seat that's opening up here, and this is what's at stake, and
Mm-hmm.
these folks will be coming to Washington, and do
Mm-hmm.
you know that this is on the agenda
Mm-hmm.
for, that, Biden or whomever wants to pass here. The fact that, his bill that could deal with so many things medically for the elderly, child care and all of
Mm-hmm.
that stuff is, cannot even be voted upon, or is not moving because we don't have a majority in the Senate. It's just insane,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not radical stuff. It's things that will make folks' lives easier. For the whole thing about that, the child care aid that was given under, the COVID-19
Mm-hmm.
package,
Mm-hmm.
that they effectively showed that it impacted childhood poverty positively. It rose people out of that. And
Mm-hmm.
then when it ended, oh boy, okay, I guess we can't, we're not going to vote on that. I mean, those are things that are just basic, things that people need to survive. And
Mhm.
so, it does beg the question, because then you do have people that say, okay, with Roe being possibly being overturned, we need to have a greater safety net. But you still have those people who are saying, no, yeah, we need a greater safety net with Roe,
Yeah.
okay? Because if if it can be determined that I don't think you have the right to this particular procedure, what's next?
Right.
Do you not want me to have medication because of the philosophy of a particular pharmaceutical company or corporation, and therefore you're going to pass something that says I can't have X, Y, and Z? I mean, it is very, very, it can be frightening, really, to
Yeah.
think about how far reaching this can be. But, like I said, like what President Obama says, don't boo, vote, that kind of thing. He said, don't boo, vote,
Mhm.
and that's exactly what we need to do. We have got to vote, because our liberty, democracy with a little d. I'm not talking about Democrats or Republicans or independents or anything else, but our democracy as we know it, it is very much under threat.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Valerie. We're going to be having you back. We're going to try to have you at least once a month, because I believe the love of justice is an important enough topic that the Love and Stuff community should be talking more about it. And I'm just excited to have you as part of our Love and Stuff community. And your brain trust is something that we can use as we go forward. And hopefully, I'm seeing some folks on YouTube that are commenting, and folks that are joining us on Facebook as well. Marcus Pohl, thank you so much. Evelyn Graham, LaRue Hill, Tawana Graham, thank you all for joining us. This is Valerie Colbert-Osamuede, who is a brilliant legal mind, scholarly mind, constitutional aficionado. She won't say specialist, but I'll say specialist. And I hope that you will hear her sage and keen insight around the law and constitution and how all of this stuff connects, how voter suppression and all of the things that are happening connects with this assault on our democracy, and how many ways that you and I can stand up and be a part of trying to derail some of these things
Yeah,
that people are trying to do, or trying to make happen. And so the opinion is leaked, and there'll probably be an opinion similar to what's happening. So we should be ready for our love for justice, should be ready. And Val said it best, not only for your state, but we need senators who are going to go and help. We need representatives who are going to go and help the agenda that is for the people, that is improving the quality of life, that is helping people be lifted out of poverty in this day and time. Everybody needs that, right? Helping people even in this mental health crisis that we are in, ensuring that people have the basic resources, that we make it a more equitable community so people have those same resources to be able to, and quite pressingly, that women have the right to say and make a decision about the reproductive aspect of their lives. And it is under siege. If you don't believe it is, and even if you're not married, brothers, your sister, your mother, your girlfriend, your friend, your cousin, somebody has their rights under siege. And if their rights are under siege, you and I are next.
yeah.
You and I are next. So we must stand in the truth of a love for justice that says, I'm going to lift my voice and vote. Valerie, thank you so much. We'll be having you back. You can follow her here on Facebook. I hope that they will flood you with questions, but we'll have a time that you can come back and maybe people can ask you questions. What's my next steps? Well, some is register to vote, right? But,
Exactly.
how do I, once we get this manifesto out here, how do I get people ignited to go and do their part?
Let
So,
me just say this. It's funny because you should say that, because sometimes I just think everybody is aware. Okay, because I'm just so into certain things, and I'm just make the assumption, oh, everybody's like me, everybody's aware. Even folks that I work with, I'm thinking they're aware. I was at a function on Saturday, and I was sitting with people that I work with.
Mhm.
And we kind of got on this subject, the leaked opinion and that kind of thing. And I indicated to them, I said, well, Michigan is one of those states that have this trigger law that if this case is overturned, there will be no abortion rights in the state of Michigan. They go back to a 1931 law. They had no thought or clue, even though that has been covered in the news and everywhere else. They really didn't. And these are intelligent, smart, pretty much connected folks, but they just weren't even really thinking how that impacts them on a local level. Because you may say, oh well, I'm over 50, I'm not gonna have a baby, or whatever. But you got nieces and nieces and
Children.
daughters and
Yep, yep,
cousins, and
yep.
now you got, if you have a daughter, she has less rights than you
Yeah,
did, that kind of thing. So it's very important,
yeah.
that you kind of think outside of yourself, and
Mhm.
me included, because I just made this assumption that everybody kind of knew what
Right.
was what the impact was going to be, and clearly they don't. And when I said that to the table, they were like immediately engaged, like, okay, well, we got to get out here and do X, Y, and Z. They were
Yeah.
immediately engaged. So just that little simple conversation sparked something in someone. Now, everybody's probably not going to do what they said they were going to do, but
Mhm.
one or two probably will.
Right.
So,
Right.
it's just keep the conversation going
Mhm.
always.
Yeah. I think that's so important and spot on. And so we're going to keep the conversation going here, and we'll be looking to you to help to lead it. Because you're right. People, you'd be surprised. People just, they would not make the connection.
Right.
Just some of the things tonight, even that you said, you just wouldn't make the connections to be able to say, wow, that's really going to impact my family, my kindred, my acquaintance, or somebody else in another state. There are people, I still have family in Mississippi. That's going to impact them. And all of the other states that you mentioned, a flood of people are going to be going to Illinois who
Yeah.
can't go in Ohio and can't go in Iowa and can't go in Indiana. They're going to all be trying to get to Illinois. And depending on what the language of what their state says, are you criminal when you return? What happens?
Right.
And so all
Right.
of these kind of considerations are important, and maybe don't impact me today, but I have a 23-year-old. It might impact her. It could impact her friends. I have nieces. It could impact
Listen,
them.
and you may have heard this, Marcus, being in the HR profession, but when this was leaked out, Amazon said they had so many requests for transfers to Canada and out of certain states that they couldn't even handle the amount of requests.
Yeah.
I mean, so people, it impacts, where you work. I mean, so
Yeah.
you got these corporations, basically saying, all we can do is protect our employees, pay them, travel. We have some corporations that are going to pay travel costs for a woman who decides that they want to have an abortion, and give a little extra leave time for recuperation. But all of that is, just look at the change of the landscape.
Mhm.
Folks deciding, I don't want to stay in Michigan, and of course, all of that impacts the state. It
Mhm.
impacts how we live. If we
Mhm.
got folks leaving here that brings us revenue, so
Mhm.
that impacts the city of Detroit because there's
Mhm.
revenue sharing.
Mhm.
All of these things that you don't think, which impacts your goods and services
Mhm.
ultimately.
Mhm.
People, they're looking for places that their employees can thrive
Mhm.
and feel comfortable. And if they say that's not in the state of Michigan because you got this draconian law that may impact, our employees, our younger employees who don't want to, who are the lifeblood of our organization, we just might leave the state.
Yeah.
Or, you got a lot of folks leaving the state, then that impacts how those of us who stay live, the goods and services that we receive. So everything is interconnected.
Yeah. And on that point, I'm really thinking about a conversation right in the HR space, because I'm not hearing enough from some of the leaders in the HR organizations, because if I were a CEO, it would be front of mind. I would be saying, now I have 80% women. What do they want? What would they say? And whether or not this is a state that I need to put pressure on and lobby people at the state legislature, say, no, this is what the law needs to look like.
Yeah.
That's true social capitalism, where your power is saying, the women in my organization are standing up and saying, no more. These
Right.
draconian laws cannot stay on the books, or these billions of dollars that we're bringing into your ecosystem will take to another state. And so I'm hoping that we will see more of that stand up within our organization, within our industry. I just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'll
Thank
stop
you.
talking.
No, we're going to have you back, and we're going to keep the conversation going. Again, tag Val Colbert-Osamuede. I'm going to make sure I tag her when I end this, so that you can keep in touch with her, but she will be back so that we can have more time to have these discussions and to help people in their love for justice. I think you should have a love for God. I think you should have a love for self. And I think there's a part of your love for your neighbor that means you love your neighbor as yourself. And if you're going to achieve justice, if I'm going to achieve justice, our neighbors must have it as well. And that includes women and their reproductive rights. Thank you so much, Val Colbert, for being with us today. And we will see you all. Click share and tag someone to join us in the conversation.